Hi, in this tutorial we'll be going through a revolver type weapon in the VR Weapon Interactor package. If you haven't watched the pistol tutorial, then you should probably watch that first, as I'll be glossing over a lot of the things that I did in that tutorial and just be pointing out the things that are different when setting up a revolver. So first I'm just going to go through the standard setup for a normal weapon, which is to open the weapon wizard and go through the normal stuff. Now what you may notice right away with this particular model I have is that it's got a lot of different parts. This is fine, so when it's asking for the gun mesh, it doesn't matter quite as much because we're basically going to modify this. This is primarily used for the hover anyway, so for now what we can just use is the handle, as that will be the bit that by default lights up. So for now we can just use it at the handle, as it doesn't really matter too much. Now the revolver doesn't have a slide, so we're going to leave that blank. It does however have a trigger, which is here, and it does not have a magazine, so we're both going to leave both of those blank, and we're just going to specify the trigger and click setup. So now it's set up. The first thing you might notice is the box glider isn't set up correctly. This is because we specified just the handle, and one of the things it tries to do is go around that, so we can modify that though. The major box glider at the top here, so we can move this glider into position, which should look something like this. Then for the trigger, then for this object, because we specified this as the gun mesh, that's where the main VR gun handler script has now gone. This collider that is attached to that is the main trigger collider for picking up the weapon, and so we'll just want to expand this one as well to cover the whole thing, just so you can pick the gun up from any position. If you're setting up the weapon yourself, it may be a good idea to make a mesh specifically for this collider. So instead of using a box collider here, you can remove this and replace it with a mesh collider. In this case, all of the meshes are separate, but if you were to add a mesh, if you added a mesh that surrounded the main shape of the weapon, you could have a much more accurate physics simulation when you let go of the weapon. For the most cases, a box collider is fine, just for picking up and dropping it. Okay, so with that out of the way, I'm going to set up the held position, which just goes something like this. Obviously this could be tweaked later if it's not exactly right. Again, no second held position. It's also semi-automatic, just like the pistol was. Damage doesn't matter too much. Bullet force, recoil, all kind of being left the same. Shoot direction, same as before. Dragging these to the end of the gun, and then shoot direction off in that direction, and save that. We'll skip this. Got no animations we want to play on fire. The hovers. Now the hovers we want to add a whole bunch, so let me just go through the main things here. Okay, great. The rest of them are just screws and signs and small details, and it doesn't really matter too much. Obviously we can add to this later if we need to. Some sounds. We've got a nice bullet decal, so we'll use that. We'll add a muzzle flash just because. Add that there. Save. Now for these, in the bullet section is where we want to start making some changes here. So use chamber bullet. There is no chamber in this weapon. The whole magazine is also where it fires from. So there's no chamber bullet, and we don't want to eject the casing when we fire the bullet. So by unticking this, it won't instantiate the spent casing when the weapon is fired, because in this case we're going to expend it when we open the revolver case. For the bullet, we'll see if we have one. So for this we'll use another 9mm bullet as the model, just because this particular weapon doesn't have a model with it. So we'll set up this bullet. We'll just set this to 56, why not? So we're going to set this to be a revolver pistol bullet, and we'll pop that in this this folder. So it's a prefab. Now it's a prefab, we can specify it right here, and we can also make a spent version of this using the spent M9 casing. Okay, so with that revolver casing set up, we can specify it in here, reference it. Now we're not going to set up a bullet setting. This is asking for the chamber position, which we don't have, and we also don't have any ejection because we're not ejecting, so we can leave all that as blank. The Bullet receiver is also not going to be used because all bullets are going to go through the integrated magazine and not through this, which is expecting a bullet to go into a chamber. So we'll leave that blank as well. Because there's no slide and because there's no magazine and because there's no removable magazine, all those sounds are gone, and so there's just these two, which is fire and dry fire. Obviously these sounds aren't right for a revolver, but they're just placeholders. There's no slide, so this is blank, but there is a trigger, so we'll go and specify that. And then the magazine, which is now integrated because we didn't specify magazine, we can say that the magazine, we can leave the magazine ID blank because that doesn't matter. The load bullet sound, we can also leave blank, but you can specify that. So this option at the top, replace bullets with spent casings, we want to tick because it's a revolver and we do want to replace them. We know that there are 7 slots in this drum, so we'll specify that to 7. There is a parent. The parent is the drum because we want because this drum is going to move outwards, and so we want the bullets to follow along with it. So we're going to specify that, and of course all the bullets we want to have visible. So I'm going to quickly go through all of these and put them all into the right position. So we're going to save the position of the bullet, and then we can also save the ejection position as being something like this. So when the drum is pushed down to the side, the bullets are going to fall out backwards this way, and then we can save that as an ejection position, and then we can move this back between the 2 positions. So I'm just going to do that for all of the other bullets. Okay, so I've placed all of the individual bullets into their positions and saved them. They're all children of the drum because we specified the bullet parent here, and will all instantiate as they appear here. Now that all the positions have been saved, you can destroy the actual prefabs and see that all the numbers are still there. So we've basically done all of the standard stuff with a normal weapon. Now we're going to do some of the extra stuff for a revolver. So we'll start with something really simple, just the hammer back here, referred to as some detail 6 in this. We're going to add another trigger, VR gun trigger. So by default, when you specify this is the trigger, it adds a VR gun trigger script to it. So all we're going to do is do the same thing here, and we're going to specify the main VR gun handler, which is on the object that we selected, which was the handle. Yeah, VR gun handler script is on the handle. So we'll specify that. Then we'll set the current position to be the default, and the pulled position is something like this. Set that to pulled, and then we can trigger between, so it goes back and then shoots forwards, and then we just tick this little button right here, which is designed for exactly this purpose, reset to default on shoot, which means that when it comes to the very end of the trigger, instead of holding it back, it will suddenly flick forward to its reset position and look just like it has, and act just like a hammer would act. So that's all to set that up. Super simple, no problems with that. So for setting up the drum, we actually want to make a new object that's empty. It will be about where the drum's going to be, and we're going to have all of these objects as children of the new object. This is to separate the revolver mesh from the overall object, so we can animate this separately. On the parent drum object, we're going to add a drum script, a VR revolver drum script, which is designed specifically for this exact task. Can set the item to be the most parent object. Untick this, I don't think this matters too much. We have one hover, which is the actual drum, is going to light up. The parent object of this is the main weapon. A parent object, just like this tooltip says, means you can't interact it unless you're holding the parent object. It requires an interactable item. This just means that you can't open this drum case if you're not holding the gun with your other hand. You can decide whether or not you want this to be on or off. Just makes it less. It just makes it easier to pick up the weapon, because if this isn't on, then potentially you might want to pick up the revolver, and instead you end up expanding the casing, which is not what you want to do. For the drum position, pretty much works the same way as all the other ones. We can set the default to be what it is right now, and then we want to rotate this to like about 90 degrees or so, and then move this on here, a little bit less rotation than that, and make sure that this circle is inside of the thing. Okay, and we can see that all of the bullet holes are clear. So we know that the bullets will be able to leave, and it'll look right. When we set that to pulled, and then we can toggle between to see the movement that it will do. We can set the magazine and the gun handler as they don't change. Now we can add an animation, and this animation can be called the VR drum rotate, and it will just be this drum, and it will rotate one time. So we've got to move forward in time a little bit, and then specify the next slot, which will just be like this. You see that it's totally fucked up. So that's brilliant, exactly what we wanted there. So if it does that, then you can add another key point and move it back. So sometimes the animation isn't perfect, but I tried to make it better. The reason in this case why it isn't great, and a thing you can fix, is that the pivot position is all the way down here in the 0, 0 of the mesh space, whereas if this pivot position, the center position, was dead center in the drum, it would rotate no problem. So because the pivot position is so far off in this particular mesh, it's making the animation have trouble smoothly interpolating the rotation. So it's something you can fix in the mesh, but in this case we'll just leave it as it is. This is reasonably good, should be good enough for this, and can be improved with more keyframes if necessary. So with that animation made, we can specify it as the default for this one, and stop recording and say don't play automatically, and then we can specify this animation in the integrated magazine right here on play on load bullet. The reason it's play on load bullet is that every time that it fires, it will attempt to load into the next bullet in the chamber, and that's exactly when it will spin, even if there's no bullet to receive. So we can specify this on this object. And we can also specify the bullet ID as being 56. That's what I specified the bullet to be. So now we can add the bullet receiver for this that we had before. It is right here. And we can say for the drum to move into the open position. So we can press toggle to move the drum into the open position. Then we can move our bullet receiver here to be in the right position. So when setting up the bullet receiver for the Revolver, it's important to make sure that the box collider encompasses both where the Revolver bullets normally are and where their open position is. So if I toggle the position down here, you can see that the Revolver box collider encompasses all of it. It could actually be a little bit taller than that. So one of the things the VR Drum Revolver script does is stop the weapon from being able to take in bullets while it's in the closed, and only take in bullets while it's in the open position. So we can toggle that back, and you can close this, and you can save this as a prefab, and then test that out. Okay, so now we're in game. We should be able to see that the Revolver is working no problem. We can shoot. I've also changed the recoil in the main section to -20 in order for it to go up. Just because of how the orientation is, it has to be a negative number, otherwise it actually dips down when you first shoot it. You can see all the bullets are in here. I've shot 2, so you can see that 2 of them are spent cartridges, or I've shot 3, sorry, and 2 of them are real bullets still. And you see I can put them in, and then I can close it up, shoot, and you can see that they've rotated around, and that the spent cartridge is in the correct place. It's a pretty nice, well-looking pistol. You can also see that the trigger and hammer is working correctly, and you can see that the spinning works as well. It's not a great animation, but it does do the trick. I can obviously remove this like that, and then drop the bullet out. I also have these set up. They're pretty simple to set up, and they just allow you to speed load. So this is the Revolver that's going to come with the actual asset, because I can't use this model, and it has 7 slots, even better, and you can see that I can go from empty to full using the speed loader. And then I also have the spent cartridges in black, just so it's a bit easier to tell. So you can load up, shoot some, and you can see really quickly and easily which ones are and aren't ready to fire. I'll quickly go through setting up those speed loaders. So speed loader, this is pretty simple, it has its own script. So we'll use this as a base, and we'll start how we would normally start, which is without any of this. So now this is just a mesh. Your speed loader will probably have a custom mesh for it, but this particular model doesn't have a mesh, and so I'll just use this one for now, even so this has 7 slots and that has 5. It's just for a reference, just a placeholder. So we'll set this up to be, just zero that out, and I gotta do the rotation, okay. And what we want to add to here, the primary script we're adding is a script literally called VR Revolver Speed Loader, and that's going to do most of the work for us. And we want to add the main object as that parent. We can switch off this as a toggle. It does have one renderer, which is itself. We can leave the rest of this as is, and parent object is blank. We don't need to mess with the sounds. We'll quickly add a position for this, just so it looks right, and we want a bullet prefab, so that's the prefab of this bullet. which looks like this. So that's the prefab of the bullet that's going to be instantiated. Now we got our own little window for here for this. We know that there are 5 slots, and that shows these panels, and now we can instantiate these 5 manually, and obviously I'm just going to put them into position, since obviously our reference mesh is a 7 slot and this isn't, so it would look something like this. Obviously if you have an actual mesh then you'd be placing these much more carefully. Now they're all placed, it's flip size 5, you can see that. We can destroy these, don't have to destroy them, we just close this and it deletes them all. Okay, so the speed loader script is only the primary one. We've also need 2 more box colliders. One box collider is for physics and the second box collider is for the trigger. So this one's to pick it up and this one's for interacting with the ground, and of course we also need a rigid body so it actually does act in terms of physics. Okay, and now it has the collider, we should be able to pick it up, no problem, and we can see all the bullets are here. We can fire off all of these bullets, so this is empty, and then we can check that it's working, popping it in, and it does. All the bullets receive in, and then they're all fireable, and you can pull them out and they all still work correctly. Hooray! And that's it, everything's working. Everything's working as expected. Thanks for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have any questions, then you can send me an email that you'll find in the description at the bottom. Thanks for watching.